So this is part two of our series on the new numbers with COVID-19 and what we're seeing in the United States. This data is from the Worldometer. Again, a great place to go. The link will be provided. One of the reasons for doing things the way I do them is to educate people so that people can make their own decisions about this data and help interpret on their own. So let's walk through it together. You help me interpret this data and I'll help you kind of understand it. And I think that's a good way of looking at things, because what I'm seeing right now in the main um, social media and other news forums is that a certain degree of misrepresentation of the data points. This is a little different than the CDC website. CDC website gives more trends. They run about a week to two behind because, again, you're collecting data from the entire country. You can't really get it together that quickly. It's unrealistic. This actually gets things in a little quicker, reports from day to day. One thing to remember is the analogy I like to think about is investing in the stock market. I'm not going to change my investing patterns, my investing um, strategy based on one or two bad days, even a bad week. I'm going to look at the trends. What do the trends tell me? If the trends tell me things are bad, then maybe I should change my strategy. So we have to look at trends, not just data points. So let's look at the new cases in the United States. And so what we do see is across the country, it's been pretty flat, less than 40,000 new cases. Any pretty given time, if you look at April 24th, for example, they had 39,000 cases that day. But as we get to the week of June 27th, we are seeing an uptick from about 38,000 to as high as 57,000 cases on July 2nd. So we are seeing an uptick in cases. Okay, so interesting. So, and this is active cases in the United States. It was pretty flat, is going up. We're not, that's not a huge spike though. Looking at this right here, this is not a massive spike. This is a gentle incline. Total deaths, that number is always going to go up because it's just additive of the entire thing. I think this is the next graph I think is helpful, which is daily deaths. This is the most important thing. Not how many people get this, but how many people get it and die. And what we see is that number actually has been going down the entire time. Again, we've talked about, if you got intubated with this initially, the chance of dying from it was about 80%. Now it's 30%. We've learned to manage it differently. We've learned to manage ventilators differently. We use different medications. We have remdesivir now. Now we have dexamethasone. We've learned a lot in the last 6 months, and that was one of the reasons why we did everything we did to flatten the curve and learn new treatment techniques, and we have. And what we see is total daily deaths is not really changing a whole lot. One thing that you have to realize as well, you have these little dips and troughs here that you can see ups and downs. A lot of this is just a reporting phenomena. Over the weekend, cases aren't as reported quite as much. The following Monday and Tuesday are. So you tend to see, after every week, you tend to see like a spike. But again, the overall trend is pretty flat. And that's for the United States. And I think that was probably the big graphic I want to talk to you about that. So let's kind of get a little more granular, because we live in the United States, but what state do you live in? Well, I live in Virginia. Virginia has been relatively unexciting. I know there's been areas that have had a lot of disease. There's a place in town in Richmond that was actually the most hard hit long-term care facility in the country. But overall, we've been relatively stable. And places that have been stable, that we had a fair number of cases. We didn't quite hit the 1,000 daily cases, but a decent number. No big peak, but it's been pretty steady in Virginia for cases. And if you look at the actual daily deaths, it's been some peaks and troughs, but no major change. The thing about Virginia is it wasn't super slow here. It wasn't super fast. It's been just kind of a steady trickle. I shouldn't say trickle, but a steady pace. Now let's go to the place everybody likes to talk about, which is New York City. They got hit hard. Now you have to look at the novel coronaviruses daily, and we're not looking at thousands. We're looking at tens of thousands. New York is a big state. It's one of the top 3 states in the country, and they got hit hard on the front end. And this is a trend that I've noticed in the data. The states that were hit hard on the front end, on the back end, aren't being hit that hard now. They had a lot of cases, and it's trickled off, which is what you'd expect if 25% of the population in New York City plus has already gotten this. That's 25+% of the people that aren't going to get it again. Or if they do, it's going to be much milder because it's no longer novel to them. And so you're not going to see a big tick. And so New York is not seeing a big tick in cases, and that's what we're hearing. If you look at daily deaths, which I think is another big number, again, a lot in New York, and we all already know this story. I'm not going to reiterate it, and we can see how basically it's trailed off and it's not spiking again. So New York has kept things under wraps and done a good job of that. Let's look at California now. The one thing you have to remember about California is that California, it never got crazy in California. It was pretty steady. It was one, the front end of things, people were expecting a lot of people to get sick. It didn't happen. What's happening now, we're seeing the cases peak later. Why? Well, because it didn't peak on the front end. They shut down quickly. It didn't spread around. People didn't get it. So once we start opening up, we'd expect cases to start going up, which is what's happening in New York. Not a beeline, not a super big spike, a gentle curve. And we'd expect that to happen in any state that didn't have a big peak on the front end like New York. Bigger question, again, with California's deaths. And it's really interesting, even though they didn't have a big peak, the deaths have been pretty stable. That is actually quite interesting. New York, the cases were lower, but the relative amounts of deaths were a little higher. Now the cases are going up. The deaths have been unchanged. A lot of that relates to the populations getting disease, older versus younger, Hispanic, non-Hispanic, Black, Asian. States have different mixtures of people groups. Every state in the United States is unique, and so is California. And so this probably represents partly that, and partly it's more outdoors. Partly California is a long state that goes up a lot, while New York is more compact. A lot of things we haven't even quite figured it out yet, but the point is California is not going crazy. So let's go to Texas. Okay, Texas is another state on the front end of things. They were not crazy. They weren't as intrusive with their shutdown laws. You saw a slow trickle of cases. Well, now you're seeing a peak in cases. Okay, fair enough. How about deaths? How are those numbers going? And what we're seeing in Texas, same phenomena. Look at this. The deaths on the front end, it's relatively steady. When there are less cases, the cases are peaking. The death rate's not really going up as well. I must, for 100% disclosure, you're going to have about a 19-day lag in deaths. It takes about that long for someone from infection to death. So you really can't really expect to know where the trend's going for another 2 to 3 weeks. But now we can't really report on the future. We can only report on what we see. And what we see now is that the deaths are not going up. And that's one of the things I've seen a lot of the speculations with what's going to happen. Case fatality rate, oh my gosh, 2.5 million people will die. No, it's going to be 3 million. It's going to be 1 million. All these estimates have been gross over estimates. So I'm a little hesitant to repeat the errors of the past all over again. I'm just looking at the data, and the data says daily new deaths in Texas is not impressive. Florida, okay, Florida, another very populated state. If you all remember, again, on the front end of things, Florida did much better than New York, closing down nursing homes, preventing the older people from getting this, which is one of the keys to how they kept this from spreading and kept the deaths low on the front end, even though they're very populous. You have the oldest population in the state. You didn't really see that big tick in the front end, but we're seeing it now in the back end. And that's, again, we're all going to get 60 to 70% of the population has to get this. We're all going to get it. It doesn't, all we're doing does is slow that process. If a goal is to wait for a vaccine, which is a year to a year and a half from now, then that's a different perspective. But if the goal is just to slow the spread so it maintains controllability so that we can create new therapeutics, then that's a very reasonable way to do things, okay? And then looking at daily new deaths in Florida, again, this has been pretty flat. Similar type of story in the front end, you saw people getting it, not dying. And in the back end, we see people getting it more, but the death rate's not changing a whole lot. So last but not least, I want to hit Arizona real quick. Arizona is a place where similar trend, the front end, it's low, again, getting a little higher. But I do want to point it out with Arizona, we do see that the deaths are starting to peak up on the back end. And I think this is where some of the data is coming from, is the state of Arizona. Now, I've looked at some of these charts trying to figure out where the data is coming from that's being pushed out there right now. I'm not 100% sure where it's coming from, but the point is that you got to look at where you live, the data from where you're at, and then give an appropriate estimation of that, and not guesstimate what's going on. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful. I will continue to put this information out there as I'm available. Please look at the data yourself, find reliable sources you can use to figure things out, and trust those. Don't exaggerate things. Just find good data and stick with it. If this has been helpful, please share with your family and friends. We'll continue to put information out there on different social media platforms as well as videos. And everybody take care and be safe.